Hey, Bastish here for 64K and welcome to another video special. And welcome back. So in today's episode I'm going to be having a look at 4 different graphic text adventure games made by Interplay and released on the Commodore 64 in the mid-80s. So I often get requests to feature this genre on this channel, and I hope you'll enjoy this first look. And before we start looking at all those games, let's take a brief look at the origins of the company that made them. Interplay were an American video game developer founded in 1983 in Irvine, California, with Brian Fargo and Rebecca Hanneman being the faces of the company. Early into their existence, they managed to form a contract with Activision for $100,000 to deliver 3 graphic text adventure games for them. 3 of these are featured in today's video. The basic style of these games came from Brian's first game he ever made, called Demon's Forge, released in 1981. The company's profile and recognition kicked into high gear from 1985 to 1990, with a series of classic RPGs including the Bard's Tale trilogy, Wasteland, Dragon Wars, and Neuromancer, a personal favorite of mine, all receiving rave reviews and sales. With the CD-ROM revolution in the 90s, they continue to innovate, being right at the cusp of the latest technology, with their excellent Star Trek point-and-click adventure games, and more RPG greats such as Stonekeep and the madness that is Carmageddon. But the 2 series that they're best known for, still to this day, is the double dose of 1997 and 98's releases of Fallout and Baldur's Gate, the 2 isometric RPG classics. Despite all the critical success the company garnered, the high cost and time of productions for each game, coupled with the massive rise in consoles' popularity, which they dipped their toes into publishing a few games such as MDK and Earthworm Jim, and a few more, it just wasn't enough. The company was in severe financial dire straits by 1998. This was the end of the classic era, with Brian Fargo eventually moving on to form In Exile Entertainment in 2002, and would eventually bring back the Wasteland franchise. The Interplay brand continued on in the early 2000s in basically name only, under Titus and Vivendi Universal, both companies not having the slightest clue how to use their newly purchased RPs.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
And now that we know a little bit more about Interplay, let me introduce the 4 games we're going to look at today. Tracer sanctioned their first release, with Mind Shadow following not long after, both from 1985. 1986 saw the double release of Borrowed Time and Task Times and Toown, all published by Activision, with only Task Times not being a part of the original deal with that company. So we'll start by looking at the first 2 games released. These were still using the traditional keyboard parser interface. Tracer Sanction hit the Commodore 64 in 1985, a port of the 1984 Apple II original by Interplay, the first game released in their partnership with Activision, the publisher. Tracer is a traditional text parser graphic adventure game, with basic keyboard words needed to be typed in and directions chosen to get around the world, plus almost full screen graphics for locations. This one has you as a space cop that's next job is to hunt down the Wing, one of the galaxy's biggest criminals. Unfortunately, information on him is pretty scarce, and you get a bunch of cash in the beginning and a spaceship at your disposal to scour the local galaxy to try and find him, Carmen San Diego style. This is actually the best part about this game, is the freedom to fly to any of the 8 different planets and meet characters, find clues, and most importantly, make money, which is a key factor as your ship needs a specific amount of fuel to reach each planet, as indicated on your star map. Some strategy and thought is definitely needed, as you can actually get yourself into an unwinnable situation if you don't save often with regards to fuel and not being able to leave a planet. The game is definitely beginner level for difficulty for this type of game, with logical puzzles and situations and very good sarcastic at times tongue-in-cheek humor, like something out of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I love just visiting the planets and just plain exploring. It's very satisfying, and the humor makes you not have the slightest clue what's going to happen next or what's around the next corner, which is always a joy. The game also has a tutorial mode called the Living Tutorial, which you can choose at the beginning, giving you a full rundown of how to play this genre of game, as well as a hint system in-game where you can get up to 3 hints in any given playthrough if you really get stuck at some point. The graphics are a direct port to the Apple II one and are not going to win anybody over, but you get used to it pretty quickly, and it has its own kind of retro charm about it, with light animations sprinkled in as well. The parser interface is pretty good when it's not being sarcastic, and the game even sports multiple endings depending on various factors, so getting the good ending is well worth a replay for sure. It was a really great start for Interplay to their adventure games on the Commodore 64. Mind Shadow hit the C64 in 1985 by Interplay and was made at the same time as Tracer Sanction, and also uses the same parser text engine. The setting for this is completely different, with you waking up on a deserted island with no memory of anything. Your amnesia state is the main plot, as you have to regain your memory, escape the island, and get back to civilization to find out the truth behind your identity and what happened to you. This is another entry-level game for the genre, with a helpful tutorial to get you going, and employing a 3-hint system per playthrough to help you out of tough areas. As you explore the island, you can use the option to think at every location. This is how you get back your memory, and sometimes even a few tips in certain areas, and is unique to this adventure game, at least at the time. The island itself is full of mysteries and deadly situations, so be sure to save often. Although it seems like it all takes place on the island, if you get far enough, you will end up sailing off in a pirate ship headed for England. Your goal is to get back to Luxembourg and find out who left you stranded out here. There's roughly 80 locations in the game, and I did like the fact that it changes up the scenery and isn't all just on the island. The story though is a bit of a slow burn and doesn't really grab you as much initially, but becomes pretty interesting with every little tidbit you learn about yourself, putting the puzzle pieces together. Parser interface is the same as Tracer Sanction and is pretty good and solid, with graphics again looking like they were directly ported from the Apple II version, but they are adequate for this style of game anyway. It did pretty good in the reviews at the time, with Zap64 giving it an overall 75% for the C64 conversion, and the game sold over 100,000 copies on its initial release. It's definitely another solid release worth trying if you've never played it. Not quite as engaging for me as Interplay's previous adventure, but still a solid quest worth exploring further.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
And on a quick side note here, if you've never played this style of game before and are not really sure where to even start or what you should even be inputting, I've actually got a tutorial video on how to play these games, and I'll leave the links in the description to help you out. And now onto the second 2 games, which still had a classic text input system, but that also incorporated a point-and-click interface and helped evolve the genre. Borrowed Time was released in 1986 on the C64 by Interplay and published by Activision. This was Interplay's first game using the combination of text input and the option to use a joystick, point-and-click style, to string phrases together, or just use a bit of both. It all works pretty perfectly. In the game you play Sam Harlow, a private detective in New York who has a bunch of thugs after him trying to kill him, in this film noir styled setting. The game starts with a bang as you have to escape death by outrunning and escaping a bunch of goons. Once this is done, the real game starts, where you gotta figure out who just wanted you killed. And the only problem is you've made a lot of enemies, so pretty much everyone you run across in your neighborhood is a suspect. Borrowed time is just filled with detail at every turn, and it's your prerogative how much you want to soak in your adventure. The writing manages to capture the thoughts and sounds of this style perfectly, as you can just imagine when reading the descriptions or talking to people, the accents and flourishes. It's quite excellent. The graphics aren't just here for window dressing either. Each scene for the most part also has animation, but not everything is mentioned in the description, so it's up to you to look and investigate things much further. There are a ton of places to visit and hide out in your neighborhood, filled with characters and things to do. It has a very similar vibe to ICOM's Deja Vu from 1985, and if you've ever played and enjoyed that, then you know exactly what you're in for. The graphics are a step up from their previous text adventures with a lot more animation and flourishes, making it fun to read as well as visually engaging. With Brian Fargo himself was one of the coders on the game as well. The combination of letting you use a joystick and a parser is pretty cool, catering to the hardcore and newbies, with me personally using a combination of both. The game racked in fantastic reviews across the board, with Zap64 giving the C64 version, which we're looking at here, a 90% overall, and it's really well deserved. This game stacks up perfectly next to my favorite noir adventures on the system, sitting tall next to Intrigue and Deja Vu as an exceptionally put together adventure romp. 1986 saw Interplay give us Task Times and Toown, published by Activision, another adventure classic using the excellent borrowed time parser and point-and-click interface. The game was designed by Michael Berlin, who had previously worked on a few Infocom classics such as Suspended and Cutthroats. He also did a bunch of great point-and-click adventure games for Accolade, such as Less Manly and Alternate Destiny. That last title has a very similar vibe to Task Times. The story takes a science fiction route, with you trying to figure out what happened to your grandfather who's gone missing. You find an alternate reality jumping machine in his basement. This takes you to the alternate 1980s punk-infused future society of Town. One hell of a bizarre, but at the same time enthralling place to go adventuring in. Your grandfather's dog also jumped through with you, and in this reality, he is a celebrity in Town and can speak. He serves as your companion, helping with puzzles and providing much needed context to the world. Your grandfather has been held hostage by a ruthless business magnate, Franklin Snarl, and it's your job to figure out how to free him and make it back home in one piece. Town itself is the star of this game, as it's absolutely fascinating to explore. Guitar picks are used as currency. Just go try and eating a glow burger. People have their own strange slang for everything, with the word TAS being tossed around a lot, meaning cool. It's such a bizarre and enjoyable place to adventure in, with great humor, which is always a bit tricky to pull off in video games. The graphics and locations really pull you into the game, making exploring very engaging. Clicking on objects on screen activates animations in many cases, bringing the simple backgrounds to life. Using a combination of point and click and text inputs works extremely well, just like their previous game. Like all these games though, make sure you search everything properly. All I'm saying is check out Gramps' basement thoroughly before jumping through the machine, or else you could end up in an unwinnable situation at the end of the game. The game itself was programmed by Interplay co-founder Rebecca Heinemann, and is just one of my favorite games in this genre, period. Its combination of a unique world, humor, and never knowing what's coming up next is its best features, and is another Interplay classic that never really gets the respect it deserves. And I hope you had a good time looking at these old classic text adventure games whose genre has long since passed. Thanks for joining me, Bastish B, for 64K. I hope you had a good time, and if you can please like and subscribe, that'll be greatly appreciated, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.